I know.
Oh, you just
We have a link there.
Loretta. I need to find out who we have on that.
Yes, yes, I'm on.
Okay. All right.
We are live.
I believe we are live. Good morning, everyone. So nice to see everyone in person. It feels as if it's been a while. And I was saying before everyone entered the room that I prefer the in-person. So I really enjoy being in the room with all of you and the synergy that we have and the discussion that's generated. We do have, for the folks in the room, we have hard copies of the packets that are coming in now and will be delivered to you. This is an in-person meeting. We do have one of our council members, advisory council members joining us via Zoom. So just be cognizant of that. We'll try to monitor and make sure that you're included in the conversation. So welcome all. I am Kelly Mitchell, and I serve as the director for the Division of Disability and Rehabilitative Services, if you go ahead and advance. And I am once again going to be chairing the meeting today. Jessica Harlan York, who has been facilitating and leading us, is out of the office. So I stepped back into previous roles. So I know it's not common for you to see me in this capacity at recent meetings. So before I turn it over to Noah to officially welcome us and take roll call, we always like to launch everything that we do with a reminder of our vision. We share that with you on the slide deck that hopefully all that can see who are watching and our members here at the table. But it's our vision that all people are empowered to live, to love, work, learn, play, and pursue their dreams. And so I know that is why all of you are here, partnering with us as we talk about how we might change the culture of expectation and services and supports for individuals with disabilities in the state of Indiana. With that, Noah, I'm going to turn it over to you to officially welcome everyone. If there's anything you would like to share, and then you can lead us with roll call.
Perfect. Well, good morning, everyone. So first off, we're going to start with roll call. Megan Berger. Sean Fulton.
Here.
Katie Stafford Cunningham.
Here.
Karen Brummett.
Good morning, I'm here.
Kate Barrow.
Here.
Kim Dotson.
Here.
Bida Deweese. Kelly Hartman. No Upchurch, he's here. Melissa Keys. Carrie Lee.
Here.
Derek Nord.
Yep, here.
Lisa Paddock. Loretta Springer. Kelly Mitchell.
Loretta is with us.
Okay.
Here, sorry.
Yes. Just a reminder too, I'm so sorry. If you're in the room, speak into your mic, because we are broadcasting via YouTube and there's difficulty in hearing. If not, so thank you.
Push the button too.
You don't have to push the button. They are live all the time.
Good to know.
Right? It's a hot mic. Hot mic, yes.
Kathy Robinson.
I'm here.
And Jessica's absent. Kyle Ingram.
I here.
Right. Matt Rodway.
Present.
Holly Wimsatt.
Present.
Teresa Colazar.
Good morning.
Christina Commons. Billy Martin Johnson. No. And that is roll call. And then next, we were going to share a video on disability sensitivity. It's a video we like to share in our presentations. We like to refer to as Awkward Bob, but it's really a disability sensitivity training video. So
Thank you. Thank you for recommending us. Oh.
Good morning, Bob.
Morning there. Hey, man. Morning, Alice! There's no need to be awkward.
Poor Bob. Like so many of us, he just doesn't know how to interact with people with disabilities.
It's pretty easy, really. People with disabilities are people first.
We need the same things that every person needs, like respect.
Good morning, everyone.
Attention! Okay. Maybe we need to be more specific.
The easiest way to show respect is to focus on the person, not the disability. It's okay. You'll get the hang of it.
One easy way to focus on the person is to watch the person signing and not their interpreter.
Or their companion.
It's really cool that you'd like to help, but do us both a favor and please ask me first. What you think might be helping? I got you. Wait, ah! Oh no, might actually not. If you'd like to offer me help, let me hold on to your elbow. Don't take mine.
Hey, would you like to take mine?
Sure.
Assistive devices help us to live our lives. They're really important and really personal.
Grabbing them only makes it weird for everyone.
What?
Please only touch our devices and service animals if we've given you permission. And don't take it personally if I ask you not to. Remember that my service animal helps me all the time. Neither of us would like it if we were separated.
Remember, we make our own decisions. We sign documents, vote, volunteer, work, and pay taxes.
We get married.
So don't underestimate me just because I have a great smile.
Just because I'm blind
May I help you?
does not mean I'm deaf.
I don't know. I think he said he was going to come. Just because I'm deaf doesn't mean I'm blind.
And just because I use a wheelchair doesn't mean that I can't sweep you off your feet.
So take a deep breath. Relax. We don't bite.
Unless we're really hungry.
Hello there, ladies. How are you?
And if you're not sure what to do, just ask.
Hi, would you still like to see a menu?
No thanks, but can you please read it to me?
Sure, definitely.
Just treat us the way you would want to be treated, and we'll all be okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Alice.
Awkward no more. Nice job, Bob. Go forth and be human.
There's no need to be awkward.
Thank you. That was great. Anyone have any comment or thought they'd like to add before we move on?
It would be so good if that wasn't so true so many times.
It is. I think that's why many of us were chuckling because we do, sadly see it often. Thank you. That's a great video.
thank you so much.
I'm ashamed to say I had not seen that before. And I'm likely gonna add that to some things that I do. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anything else you would like to add before we move into the meat, if you will, the meeting?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. All right, well, my goal today is to make sure Kyle has time to talk about this. Kyle. Kyle. We say that every meeting. It's going to happen. I'm gonna make it happen today. So briefly, I just wanted to give kind of a broad overview on the Medicaid forecast strategies, a little bit of waiver update. Then I'm going to turn it over to Holly to really delve into a bit more detail on a couple of matters and that are related to both strategy and waiver. But we continue to move forward with the strategies that have previously been shared. We are continually updating our communication, frequently asked questions. There will be updated information coming out again soon. I would say the next few business days, Kathy. Early next week, just as we receive questions, know that we bring that back at a leadership level. We process it as a large team, really try to address those and provide more clarity. We are, I think, moving along nicely with the expedited enrollment process for structured family caregivers or caregiving providers. I don't know the number now. I know we were well over 200 new providers of structured family caregiving have been enrolled through this process. And I think there are just a few more in the pipeline. Is that correct, Holly? Also, I think for the majority of individuals in this room, you're well aware that we did announce that there will be a wait list implemented for the aged and disabled waiver. We are working very closely with the care managers as to that process, also working on the backside systemically to ensure that we can operationalize it. In addition, just working on overall improvements in communication so that individuals better understand the process, how it works. So there will be more to come on that as we move through the process. Just as an awareness, the waiver, we are approved through CMS for a certain number of waivers. That is around 50,000. So we are quickly approaching that number. That runs on a 12-month cycle. So that cycle starts over again, if you will, July 1. So that would be the earliest that we would see anyone move from that wait list. So.
Move off. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, move off of or move from that wait list. We are still in conversation. I know there are a lot of questions around the waiver amendments and the public comment. I will again stress every comment that was received was reviewed, categorized, considered, and our submission to CMS. But we are still in discussion with CMS. So we're at this time not really able to provide additional information. Obviously, their approval is required before we can implement anything that has been proposed. But continue to watch for communication around that. We will, as we have information, post that to that web page. We will also reference it in any engagement that we have with provider groups, with individuals and families, with care managers. So just continue to watch for that. We are ready to share when we have more information. And I think the other big piece is just a reminder that the quote unquote lever was pulled on ending retroactive Medicaid eligibility. I try to say that clearly because what ended was that initial determination for Medicaid eligibility. There has been some confusion. I think Matt, you and I were talking about this yesterday. If you have an individual that is currently enrolled on Medicaid and they are also on Medicaid waiver, they are receiving services. And at their redetermination, something happens where the Medicaid lapse, documentation didn't get in, meaning what have you. As long as, I mean, there is, I suppose, some chance that they would be found not eligible, that would be highly unlikely. But as long as that paperwork is completed, the process, that redetermined date is still retroactive. It's just that initial Medicaid eligibility determination. So if you get questions around that from individuals, and I know that has caused some anxiety, and it's been asked of me personally multiple times.
But it only goes back 90 days. So a retro, so they lose it, it only goes back 90 days. So like if you lose it only goes back 90 days.
I don't know if you lose it because you had it previously.
Yeah.
It only goes back,
It won't fill that gap.
well, it goes back 90 days from the initial application on an initial.
That's for
On a
the,
redetermine, we've got a bunch of them.
Yeah.
We've got a bunch, and people are losing Medicaid because they probably were never during COVID ever eligible. And I know we just worked with Becky on this because we had a bunch of people who weren't being allowed to discontinue. They should have never gone on the waiver. They got on and they needed to come on. And we were told, no, you gotta keep serving. Well, we're not supposed to serve people free. And so it's been quite a battle to kind of go, because there's now we're serving people for free and we're not supposed to do that against Medicaid rules, but it only goes back 90 days even for redetermination.
Yeah, I think there are some situations though where we have been able to work with our
Yes.
partners at DFR.
we have,
And, you know, if there's some sort of a
Mitigating.
glitch or mitigating factors, we have seen that retroactive. Again, that is with people that are already
they're
in
already on,
service.
yes.
And then there's,
There
you
might be an
know,
exception.
some issue that arises, maybe that's a miscommunication, maybe it's, you know, the family not understanding what documents to get to DFR. And that's why we have tried to really help case managers and providers and families. Remember, if you get something from FSSA,
This letter, you
do not be afraid, open it up and let's, you know, if you have questions, reach out. So, yeah, and I know case managers work with
We have a
families.
dedicated person just to this issue.
And I-
that's
yeah.
this issue. But I think it's just, we still see people that got it during COVID
Correct.
that probably weren't eligible. So there is still some people that I think we'll see this year that will lose their waiver because they probably never were eligible for Medicaid. But it's getting less and less, but we've got to, right now, I think we saw 5.
And I think too, is, you know, to Holly's point, and it's really been highlighted in some of our recent activities, that for individuals and families, it can be very confusing. And again, Matt and I were discussing this yesterday and trying to strategize around how to better communicate it. But you may be approved or eligible for the waiver. You still have to have Medicaid and be approved for Medicaid. And one doesn't always make the other happen, or there's assumptions that it all happens in the same spot. So I think one of the things that we want to focus on, and where I'm going to finish and then hand it off to Holly, is we are looking at intensifying our effort and engagement with individuals and families. So looking at some communication strategies, maybe to go forward with that. So be on the lookout for that. We would rely on you to kind of help us amplify and share that as we continue to figure a pathway to just better enhance the communication with the folks that are impacted directly. I think there's been, and we've had a strong effort engagement with providers and care managers and associations. And we have been putting a lot out public. It's not that we've not been doing that. But I think recognizing how might we do better there. So that's kind of the broad overview. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Holly. She's going to speak a little bit about service plan review and some other pieces.
So before we move off of that, so I have a couple of different questions. So one on the CMS approval of the waiver. So when that is done, will you also make available and release the approved waiver, just if there was any changes from what was submitted originally?
We typically would share that.
Okay, wanted to make sure of that. And then two, around the A&D waiver waiting list issue, a couple of things that we're hearing is that providers are now not taking any new clients and not doing any level of care changes at all. I know that's a provider issue, but I don't know if there's any communication that you could do, because I would assume we still want people to be able to get services, even if they are on the A&D waiver currently.
Say that one more time. What is happening?
Well, there's a few things happening. So one, we are hearing that provider agencies are telling people that they're not taking any new clients. So if they're period.
Okay.
That's been happening for a while.
And then we also are hearing that the AAAs are refusing to take any applications.
Are the AAAs helping people navigate to,
Well, finish your sentence first.
Oh,
I assume my answer will be the same.
yeah, are the AAAs referring people to entities that will accept applications, or are they just saying, no,
Yeah, no, this is for
okay.
Yeah.
They're the currently the only ones who can take applications. So the point of entry to the A&D waiver at this time.
That's what I thought. I was just.
And
So
then
you were hearing that AAAs are not taking applications for the waiver.
correct. And we've reached out to them, but any help from you guys would be appreciated.
What's the scope of the waiting list?
I think we're still assessing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. And then as you are putting together some of the fact sheets around the structured family caregiving, there seems to be a lot of misunderstanding and miscommunication around skilled respite.
Okay.
So if you guys could help provide some clarity on how you see skilled nursing working with SFC, that would be really, really helpful.
Thank you for that feedback.
Thank you.
Okay, you want me to go ahead and dive in?
Go right ahead.
Okay. I hope I can be heard. I'm usually pretty loud. So, yeah, thank you, Kelly. Just wanted to provide a little more information on some things that Kelly already mentioned, specifically around some engagement that's already occurring with stakeholders. That includes our service plan review work group. So there is a cross-divisional, cross-agency group of staff that are reviewing service plans as they come in on the A&D and TBI waivers. So as plans are submitted as initials, updates, annuals, there is some additional resources that are reviewing those plans. There are some of those plans that have always been reviewed when they have come in. And those plans would be things with home modifications, vehicle mods, specialized medical equipment, some of those things. But we have broadened those areas or those plans that come to the state for review on the A&D and TBI waivers. Again, some of those plans are things that were already reviewed, and then we've added some other plans to be reviewed. Again, those reviews are based are our means, I guess is a better way to say that, to review to ensure that those plans are person-centered, that they are adhering to the current service definitions that are in our agent disabled waiver today, and that those plans are reflective of services to address the needs of the individual. And that they're consistent with the needs of the individual. So some of those expanded criteria that we're reviewing on those service plans includes service plans on the TBI waiver that include more than 24 hours residential have a day. And also any plan that has 2 providers for the same service. That's not problematic. It's just something that we need to be aware of. And then also any plans that include an LRI providing services. And attendant care for individuals who are 22 years of age and older of 240 hours a month or more. Again, those are situations that would prompt us to review the plan. Okay, and then for someone under 22 years of age, it's 80 hours or more of attendant care a month. The delineation in the age is because we know that people under 22 years of age have some entitlement programs that they can access, including educational services, EPSDT, and some other, again, entitlement services that are also available. So again, those are just some characteristics of plans that would trigger a review. And that review is again to look at that, make sure that there is those services are aligned with our service definitions and that they're congruent with the need and person-centered, that those plans are person-centered. Yes.
All right, so what's that? So we're hearing from like a few a number of clients that are on their transition to us, that there's a huge backlog, that there's like 200 and some that have been sitting there for a couple of weeks waiting for review of plans. And so I'm just curious to what the backlog is. I know it's just a higher level of scrutiny, right? Rightly so.
Well, I think, yeah, Karen, that's a good question. So I think rather than what I would say is that there are a lot more plans that the state's touching now. So the volume is very different than it was 2 months ago. We have a team of probably almost 30 people. Now, those are not all full-time. We have some vendors that are full-time. And some state staff that are attempting to dedicate full-time to this. But there's a large number of people reviewing those plans that have underwent the same training so that we're consistent in our reviews. I couldn't speak to a backlog per se. I just know that the volume that we're reviewing is significantly higher. I think we've reviewed probably upwards of 2,500 plans already. But I also want to note that we have requested some additional information on a lot of those plans, right? As we review them, if there's questions, we want to ask those questions. Care managers are not necessarily used to us, to getting those questions, right? So there is some enhanced communication, I would say, with care managers about those plans. So it's
training on justification.
Well, and I think there's, those plans were previously auto approved. So it was a pretty quick turnaround, right? But we are making every effort to address those as quickly as we can.
If there's a time sensitive, is there someone they need to be reaching out to?
Yeah, care managers have the option of emailing the I'm going to try to get this right. The DA response team.
Yes.
Inbox. We have a lot of inboxes. So they have the option of emailing that mailbox so we can take a look because we certainly want to be as responsive as we can to urgent situations.
May 1st that are once getting nervous, it will not be a smooth transition.
Are you seeing a gap in, this is a new waiver under this, in this division, or a new, not to FSSA, but here, are you seeing a gap in kind of expectations that, are you planting new expectations or value bases on the folks working these waivers that maybe weren't held by that group versus I know the work that you've all done in the other waivers have been high value. I mean, it's been very clear on person-centeredness. Are you finding a wide gap now working with this new community group?
First, I'm going to thank you for recognizing
Yeah.
that we work hard to be very person-centered and that sort of thing, but
It's been
you know,
lot of time I mean, it's been a huge effort over the time.
Sure.
And I see that as a huge value add to these new waivers potentially, so.
Sure.
That's a low.
So I want to emphasize that we are very cognizant of the fact that this transition it's important for us to make it as seamless as we can for individuals and providers and all stakeholders. There are some differences, obviously, between how DDRS has operated their home community-based services and how Division of Aging has. But we are collaborating very closely with Division of Aging. And, you know, while we were preparing and have been preparing for this transition, certainly we have those service plan reviews have required a very high level of collaboration with Division of Aging because they're the ones that have that knowledge about those services. So when I talked about that review team, including people from Division of or other divisions, that's Division of Aging, that's OMPP, that's DDRS.
Yeah.
You know, because we are, you know, we are still learning from them about the age and disabled waiver. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that's, yeah, I think, you know, I just want to stress that we're really kind of all in this together. So.
I think to FSSA's credit and to kind of go just a little bit deeper, I've admired, because I don't do it directly, but the ongoing engagement with the care managers. There's been a lot of connectivity there. I think opportunity for training and alignment. So I think to your point, yes, that I think really just trying to work toward that broader goal of alignment and ensuring that we're all working with that same value base and understanding. And the service plan review process has really provided an opportunity to do that.
It really did.
We're on a one-to-one
Yeah.
engagement. So it's, you know, more like a case.
Right? Individual
Yeah.
technical assistance.
Yes.
Saying it's good, it's important.
I'm going to jump back in.
Please
'cause
do.
I'm running over time and it's almost always me that's guilty of taking Kyle's. So real quickly, also wanted to note that we are, and since, oh gosh, March 13th, we've been having biweekly webinars with care managers. That has been great. I think it's provided us an opportunity to provide them with a lot of information, but also get some feedback from them about, you know, kind of the challenges they're facing and what they need from us. So that has been really, really, I think, helpful on both accounts. We already talked about SFC and the 200 providers, so we won't go into that. I would also say that back on your point, Derek, we have found a lot of really great opportunities, as Kelly mentioned, to really further align how we review service plans. Yeah. Even those HOMOD and EMOD services across all of our waivers, so that there's, you know, more consistency for individuals and for those providers. So Kyle, thank you. Kyle's like, come on, Holly, keep moving. You're fine. I do want to just give, and we don't often do this, but I want to give a shout out to some of the BEAD staff, because a lot of this work on the service plans, the wait lists, or the potential wait list on the A&D waiver, we've had BEAD's team members kind of leading those and facilitating those efforts. And that is in addition to their regular duties. So Lisa Davis, who has worked for us for a number of years, started in one of our field offices and is now in central office. She has been leading the service plan review team and providing that training and that very intense collaboration with the Division of Aging on those service plan reviews. and with OMPP as well for future state. Lori Fine has been leading our efforts around those services, excuse me, that require the what we call the RFAs, but those home mods, vehicle mods, specialized medical equipment and supplies. Lori's kind of our expert in beads, so we have found some great opportunities there to utilize her experience and knowledge and do a crosswalk across those waivers and see where we can, find opportunities to further align. Heather has led our group on the LRI work and the paid family caregiver work, and very much played a key role in developing some surveys that went out to gather more information for us so that we can make informed decisions. And then lastly, Shelley Thomas, last but not least, has been spearheading the work around the waiver unduplicated counts and slot tracking and the wait list. So just want to do a public shout out to them for taking on those tasks and taking them on in a way that is always keeping the individuals we support in mind, and really using those collaboration skills with our other partners. So next slide. And then also we have a internal communication team in BEADS that has formed that will really be helping us communicate thoroughly with all of our stakeholders or relevant parties. And John Van Wicklen, our chief of staff, is leading that group as well. So want to give him a shout out and also let folks know that you'll be seeing, additional communications come out from us, and John will be the magic behind the curtain on those. So
I'm gonna give them. They have done a lot of hard work, and Holly as well.
Might ask just a future topic to put on the agenda is just, and maybe I'm the only one that haven't been able to figure this out. So going forward, July 1, I understand we've got a wait list going now for the A&D waiver. But come July 1, that becomes 2 different waivers, that wait list.
Yes.
And just how is that going to be viewed? Like determination? Because, we've got this outside entity for the A&D waiver and managed care and under 60.
Do you mean the
only
process for the wait
process,
list or?
and then who's offering choice and how's that gonna work? I would just like that to be a topic that we touch on at a future meeting, because I think it really does drive home how that's gonna, how the health and wellness waiver is gonna work in the new world on July 1. Does that make sense?
with
I
regard to the
don't
wait
know
list.
that I'm being, so maybe I can follow up with you outside.
A&D waiver is everybody who qualifies for nursing home level of care, no matter what age you are, right? But come July 1, if you're over the age of 60, you go to
Pathways.
You go to pathways. If you're under 60 and meet it, you're going to
Health and
health and
wellness.
wellness. So is that one wait list? And then you just keep.
No,
No.
we can answer that
Yeah.
today. Go ahead, Holly.
I would just say, no, that will not be one wait list. That will be 2, but I want to emphasize that. And I think that's something we can consider for a future meeting, but I would say that the state will maintain that wait list regardless of whether we're talking about the health and wellness or pathways. That will be maintained by the state.
I think we spoke to this previously publicly, but the total number of waivers that we have under A&D have been, I'm just gonna say, allotted to either pathways or health and wellness proportionately. So based on numbers served. So that was done pre-forecast. That was a part of the planning process. It has nothing to do with strategies per se. It really was the pathways implementation. So there will be 2 distinct, if you will, wait lists, but to Holly's point, those will be maintained by the state.
And I
Both will
think,
be on.
I think your question is about as someone comes off the wait list, what are the steps?
So is it more
If it's
that
pathways versus health and wellness? And those are probably gonna look a little different
will be
depending
different.
on where you fit into the waiver world at that point, based on your age. So we would probably set aside time in a future meeting to kind of break down. We're not at that point yet, but we will be soon. So I think we can definitely break down the steps a little bit more from a process standpoint, because the AAA's role at that point and what that offering of choice and how to get folks set up in whatever path they're on, if it's the health and wellness path or the pathways path.
pathways journey, whatever.
Pathway. We can flag that for a future discussion before that occurs.
I think that would be good. And there'll probably be some other operational
I
things.
know
that
we've
we
been
could
asked,
present.
and I'm like, I can't answer that. I don't know.
We're not there yet. We've
And
got
I
to
was
get
like,
the
well,
letters out, letting people know
part
that
of
they're
my
on the wait
job,
list
so-
first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just meant, we can just know
Yeah.
that before that gets implemented. But- Sorry, Carmen.
No, it's okay.
And then lastly, I just wanted to mention and share with this group that we had 3 individuals with Division of Aging, 3 employees that transferred to our bureau. That's Amy Rapp, who is our BEADS eligibility and level of care manager. She had been with Division of Aging for a number of years. I'm looking at Karen because she probably remembers her from way back, right? I did. Okay. And then Amy Fenn was in provider services in Division of Aging and is now in provider services in BEADS. And then Matt Nicholas was in provider services in DA, but he has joined BEADS as a waiver review specialist. So we were very happy to have them and they are caught on really quickly.
Yes.
And we're very grateful to have them on our team. So.
All right. I think we're ready to move to our next point. We have our update from the Bureau of Rehabilitation Services. Teresa Cole is our director today. I'm turning it over to you.
All right, thanks, Kelly. I'm gonna speed through here, so just stop me if there are questions. Again, similar format that you've seen from the BRS updates over the last, I don't know, year and a half or so. So this should look somewhat familiar, just new data plopped in there, more updated data plopped in there. The first item here speaks to our staff. We are still sitting pretty happy with our staff retention, our recruitment abilities. As of April 10th, of our 200 counselor positions, 5% were vacant. And yes, we are proceeding to fill all of those. That's 10 positions. And then 16 staff, the second factor we look at to kind of determine our overall retention is how many new people do we have, right? How many new people have we hired within the last 6 to 12 months? And so we have 16 staff, which represents 8% of our total VR counselor positions that are in trainee status. So we kind of calculate those together at about a 13% turnover rate or an 87% retention rate. So again, coming from where we were, 5, 6, 7 years ago, this is just vastly improved. The next item here is around moving to order of selection and same status as the last update. I believe, I can't remember the last time I was here in this meeting, but we now only have 1 category closed, that is category 3. About 2% of folks are being assigned to that category, which means 98% of all who are eligible are moving forward without any stop on the wait list, which is great. We've done 13 different polls or releases from the wait list to date, with the most recent one being this month. Almost 4,000 moving off the waiting list. And then the following data on this slide is the breakdown of what happened with those 3,967 folks. Keeping in mind that we just did the last release of about 200 people on April 1st. So of course, those folks were still in process of contacting a lot of them and getting them in for their planned meetings. But overall, of those, again, moving off the wait list over the last few years, 26% either are still in services or were served and have already exited. Of that group, 21% have already exited with employment. So those were our kind of the successes thus far with folks moving off the wait list and into services and exiting with employment. There are 4% we're still in process of contacting. Again, that is by and large from the release that we just did a couple weeks ago. 21% we were able to reach them and they no longer needed or desired services. There's 100 different reasons why that could be. They may have retired. They may have gone on and purchased the item, the hearing aid, the device, the item that they initially came to us for. They may have moved, all kinds of different reasons. There were 36% that despite multiple outreach attempts, we just could not reach. No phone returned or no phone call made it through because it was disconnected. Return letters, email responses. Again, after multiple attempts, we just were not able to reach them. And then 13% that we reached and were just closed for other reasons. Again, maybe, health issues or incarcerated, those types of things. I think, as you all know, we opened that second category in July. When we went into the order of selection in 2017, we closed 2 of 3 priority categories. We've since opened the second category, which again leaves just 1 category closed, which is our category 3, those with, I guess you would say that those with the kind of lower or least significant disabilities. And again, that represents about 2% of folks that are eligible. We are moving people off of that third category wait list. Again, we just did a release in April. And we anticipate that everybody will be off of the wait list before the end of the calendar year. Yes, likely, yeah. So we are looking forward to closing the books on order of selection. We will have made it out, if you will, within about a 7-year period, which is far better than what a lot of states fare. There is a national trend where people are getting off of those wait lists. But I think we've done it fairly speedily compared to, I think, what the experience has been for many. Yep.
First of all, congratulations. That's huge. I wrote on my notes, I remember when order of selection was implemented and everybody was saying it was never going to end.
Yeah, right.
35 states went into it and never came out of it. So that's amazing. Congratulations. Another question that I have from a process standpoint is when you say order of selection is closed, we've opened up all the categories, et cetera. Is that something where we can say officially, like we submit something and we officially say we are no longer in order of selection? Or is that something where we just keep it open in case we ever have to go back to those how does that part work?
You can do either. Some states opt to still sort of check the box that they're in an order, but say that all their categories are open.
Okay.
We have, and that's really, we're sort of, the box is checked in our state plan that we do every couple of years. So we just submitted our draft state plan. As you know, that was out for comment a couple months back. That is with the feds right now under review. And we've asked our feds, how do we articulate, because, within a 3 to 6 months of this state plan becoming live, we're going to be out of order of selection. So we're in it as of the time we're submitting, but we also don't want to sit in that status for the next 2 years per the Fed. So they gave us some thoughts on how we could do that. And essentially we just indicated in there that we anticipated being out by the end of calendar year 2024. And as of on or before January 1, 2025, we would ask that RSA identify that Indiana is no longer in an order of selection.
Okay.
So we'll see if they remember that, that conversation.
If the same people are there.
Right. But at this point, we don't, and we'll get to some more data. Our volume is growing. The folks coming to us, those numbers are getting large. So obviously, staffing capacity and caseload sizes are still a matter that we're paying a lot of attention to. We're still working to mitigate that in some parts of the state. But at this point in time, I think our our preference and our plan is to indicate that we are not at all in an order. Again, some states will say we're still in an order, but nothing's closed, or one category is closed, but people only sit there for a week, or sit there for 2 weeks. I think we're leaning toward, we're done at this juncture. We don't see a reason to keep that status available to us at this point in time.
Great, thank you.
Yes, good question. All right, I mentioned we're seeing some growth, which is very good because there's been a kind of a downward trend nationally in the VR world, really initially following the implementation of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And then obviously COVID did us no favors in terms of folks saying, let's go to work. It's May of 2020 and sounds like a good time to start looking for a job. So we, I think universally across the board have experienced a bit of a downward trend that is now coming back up pretty strongly, at least pretty strongly in Indiana, and definitely seeing some of that trend nationally. So just some data comparison here during the first half of this current state fiscal year that we're in. So July of 23 through or I guess this is October, we're a little more than halfway, October of 23 through March of 31, we've had 4,201 new VR applicants. I put halfway, but actually we're I think about, give me a second. Okay, this is state fiscal year. This is July 1 through March. So we're about 2/3, 3/4 of the way through the year here. So we are trending up from where we were this time last year, about 12 to 15% in terms of our number of applicants. For comparison, the same time frame last year, again, we're seeing about a 12 to 50% increase. If you look at the entirety of SFY 23, we had 5,208. And again, here we are, 2/3 of the way through, or I guess 3/4 of the way through, and we're at 4,201. So we are projecting an increase. We also saw an increase between 22 and 23 of about 10%. That is, we're thinking that that's going to be even a little bit of a higher increase as we get through the end of 24. And that's for VR applicants. For pre-ETS applicants, we're staying fairly stable, a little bit of an increase year to year, but that number isn't trending quite as, leaping quite as much or not near as much as VR applicants. In terms of those still on the waiting list, I mentioned we just did a release a couple weeks ago. As of April 10th, we have 407 on the waiting list. We are anticipating we'll have 2 more releases the next couple of quarters. And then just to show you how quickly or not so quickly new people are adding to the wait list, because of course, when we're projecting our future releases, we're looking at not only those sitting on the wait list today, but how many new people are going to be coming in between now and then and assigned to that wait list. And the answer is not a whole lot of people, new folks are going to be assigned to that wait list per the data that we have to assess that on. And we know that because since July, we've only had 81 new folks added to that category 3 wait list. So again, we're anticipating pretty slow growth with new people coming in, which will still, we believe, allow us to get everyone captured in 2 more quarterly releases. And then the next item here is really a snapshot. How many people are being served today? And I always give the caveat here that this is only individuals who are in service status. So they've already gone through all of the application eligibility. They have a service plan and they're actually in service status. This does not include pre-ETS, that potentially eligible pre-ETS group. This does not include people on the wait list. This does not include people in application or eligibility status. This is just who's actively in services right this moment in time. And that is 10,068 individuals. That is about a 6.5% increase from the previous snapshot. So again, you saw the growth in applicants. Of course, that also reflects in some growth in folks receiving services. Since this is a snapshot and just represents 1 minute in time, because people are always coming in and exiting, I also pulled the total number who we served. Again, that's just those who actually receive services. That doesn't include people who got to application or eligibility or other statuses. We had 12,660 during the last state fiscal year. And just as a comparison, again, you can see there was some growth between state fiscal year 22 and 23. Again, we're anticipating even more growth between 23 and 24 based on our data projections and the numbers that we're seeing. And then finally, just a reminder, there's still a handful of days to provide comment on the draft VO rules that are out right now for public comment. You won't see any massive shifts or changes in the work that we're doing based on these rules. You probably forgot that we were even doing rules because it's been so long since we started the process. It's been probably a good 6 years since we initially sat down and started looking at our current rules and identifying what needs to shift to align with WIOA, because when our rules were promulgated, they were promulgated, I think, just weeks before the federal law changed. So of course, our state rule does not align with WIOA, and that's a problem. So that was the major goal of our new rule, is to certainly align with those federal requirements. If you look at our current rule, PREATS is not even mentioned because, again, PREATS is new per WIOA, and our rules were promulgated before WIOA was official. So it establishes PREATS, also another service that is new with WIOA, which is BR funded extended services for youth. That was not an allowable use of our dollars before, and now it is, and we are already providing those services just as we are already providing pre-ed. So really kind of codifying things that the feds already told us we had to do, right? And so we're already doing them. It also addresses some items that have come up in previous monitoring. So I think, we had an RSA monitoring last year that did not result in findings, but we also were monitored in 2017. We've also had a few state board of accounts audits over the last, handful of years. And those audits and monitoring resulted in things like our provider registration process. We did not really have a formalized vendor registration process 5 years ago. Now we do. So again, those kind of practices that we already have in place are now codified in this, or will be as this new rule gets to promulgation. And then just some basic improvement in clarity and organization. Our last rules were, quite frankly, put together pretty quickly. There was a class action lawsuit that we were working through, largely around establishing, this is so specific, but establishing again, promulgated rule language around information on what constitutes like a significant hearing loss. There were some practices we had in place, but we really needed the authority in the rule to establish that. So those were put together pretty quickly based on that very small kind of nuanced issue. And now this particular set of rules, while we obviously did not want it to take 6 years, there were some factors outside of our control that resulted in that, including the state's just process for promulgation changing a couple of times during that process, a lot of turnover with our legal staff. So in a sense, kind of starting fresh with each new person. We did want to take the time to make sure that now we were applying some lessons that we had learned from the first process. It didn't need to be a quick process. We wanted it to be the right process. So that's a little bit about why, if it's been a minute since we've, or a year or 5, since we've talked about the rules, because they've really kind of been hung up in, a lot of promulgation.
Just
and
to say how long I think Kylie celebrated with us when we announced.
She did. She did. Yes. And again, because there isn't anything drastic in these rules.
It's been a bit.
These were not ever there were other rules that just continue to kind of be prioritized across FSA and the state above this, but we were finally able to be slotted in there. It was very interesting because we've been working on these for so long, and then like in early March, we got the note that these are going to be out March 20th. We're like, oh, okay. So you wait 6 years and then it's coming out, and now it's once you get the word, it goes. So if you have comments, love to hear your feedback or comments. You have until April 22nd to do so. And the link, you can also see information about the town hall or public hearing taking place on April 22nd.
I would like to say that I hope the increase of people coming to you is because of our army of CCIR people.
Yes, it could be, so I think there's lots of factors, but yes, I like the army of.
Well, we do have an army now.
Yes, yeah.
It was just two of us.
Yes. Yeah, we're definitely seeing folks come in, shifting, and we're obviously with our SE Plus project, that really complements the work that you guys are doing and getting folks over. And then I think some of the referral sources we had in the past that really slowed down or even maybe stopped referring because they perhaps inaccurately assumed that people would go on a wait list, are now picking back up with some of those referrals as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Any other comments or questions for Teresa before we move forward? Thank you. Lots to celebrate, Appreciate it. We're gonna move next. Oh, before I do, just, I wanted to reflect, and I know because we're making notations, but after roster, I saw Kelly Hartman joined us, and then also Bitta. So I walked down to grab a packet. So just so noted for the record. Welcome. Gonna move into appropriately. Advisory Council bylaws. All of you should have received the draft. Lots of red line in there and suggestions. This is really reflective of statute, if you will, and updated accordingly. What I would like to do, as I was whispering to Kyle, is so that we can formally recognize this process, if we could entertain a motion, then a second, and then if we need to open up for discussion on any matters around the bylaws before I would call for a vote. So. Kate, you moving to approve as presented then? Hartman seconds. And Kelly Hartman with a second. And I believe we have a note here, but if you'd make reference to that kind.
You need to correct GCPDs in section 4 on membership. Our agency is not capitalized. It's just a grammatical error. Otherwise, it's listed correctly.
Capture that. Okay, so we do have a formal motion and a second, so we can open it up for discussion.
I apologize for my English degree.
You got it, apologize for your English degree.
So it's just wonky. On the purpose, it says the council will provide technical expertise and lived experiences. The council is not providing lived experiences.
Right.
So I would put something like something that's not what that is.
So going back to the membership, I do have a question about 12 and 13. 2 members appointed by the director, each of whom is an individual with an intellectual or developmental disability, and 2 members appointed by the director, each of whom is an immediate or extended family member of an individual with an intellectual or developmental disability. That is in addition to anybody who may serve in these other roles who have wear 2 hats. Okay.
That's in addition to. The others are very prescriptive, and then while obviously the role that's described is pointed to that those are pointed to.
And with the changes, the change up of FSSA and the new waiver programs, I'm wondering, is this representative of the broader? And should
It will not be going forward. And I think that's something that we will need to address post July 1.
Yeah.
As this is a DDRS advisory council, and we have the governor's planning council. But I think we'll have to have discussion if we want this council to be representative of the all, and how might that look. But we would also have, there's legislation or statute specific to this, so.
Right. Yeah, no, there's a lot.
So we do need to, that
And the
is a
transition
future
yeah.
agenda item. I think even a year ago, we talked about
just a technical amendment to be submitted for next session. So we have to do the same thing because we're out of compliance on our membership as well.
I'm sure there's a great reason on purpose for the particular areas that are listed.
I believe, and I'm gonna look at Kim Dodson. I think that's straight out of
Page 1.
this listing, isn't that straight out of the statute?
Okay, so adding or deleting any of that is irrelevant.
At this time.
From a purely liability perspective, when you look at right before item E on membership length of terms, it basically says if somebody's not doing their thing, they can be asked that we get rid of someone, but it might help us have a process for how that is. I mean,
Yeah.
just adding what is the process of a council request to ask for a member's resignation?
I would agree. I actually did want to highlight, I think this isn't directed at anyone currently sitting at the table, but there is an attendance or participation requirement. And again, I think we know what it is, but we may want to, not necessarily now, but future state better define that process.
There's probably, given other things I'm involved in life, there's probably other reasons than poor attendance that sometimes people get asked to find other opportunities.
Yeah.
And that might need to be added to the.
Absolutely.
Is that a bylaws issue or a procedural policy?
I think we could do that as
Okay.
procedure.
That, I mean, that's how we typically do it too with GCPD is it's not in the bylaws per se, but it is in the policies and procedures manual. So, yeah.
Yeah, because I think that might be covered in C. You could just add a policy to make that a little bit stronger.
The other thing in F, termination of membership, down at item number 2 under B. It's the first time you mentioned presiding officer, and so I went through the whole thing to try and figure out if you had defined the presiding officer, but you don't until this bottom of the next page. So I would move the definition of presiding officer before you refer to it.
Yeah. What's your recommendation, Greg?
Maybe. Maybe above purpose or after purpose. After purpose, before membership, maybe.
So make it
I think it's,
for item 4.
yes, somewhere up there.
But I want to be specific because we can approve with no reasons.
Yeah.
Check. Move to,
Move the providing.
so move that section.
The presiding officer section?
Presiding officer, make that 4.
Yeah, I mean, it could absolutely be under, it could be under composition of the council.
Yeah, for sure, it could.
And the only other question I had was just curiosity. Why is VR the only cool people we get to hear about? Like there's other functions within DDRS, and this is the DDRS Advisory Council, but the only subsection that we address, other than getting data in quarterly reports, is that BRS will give us a specific input. Would we not also get that from First Steps and others?
Kelly, can you?
We did.
Yeah.
No, in the bylaws, it doesn't say that.
Can
It
you?
only mentions BRS.
She's talking about this last, where it talks about report too.
That is.
It's
from
all
statute.
straight from the
I was gonna say
statute.
that,
That
is
is probably a
a statutory
technical
requirement.
amendment to the statute.
Gotcha.
but-
we did, Kelly, we did an amendment to that when order of selection was implemented so that we could make sure that we were getting the data on that. So I remember doing that.
But I think that's a good point.
Not everything that's in statute is in the bylaws.
Right.
Right.
So
And
there's
it-
still those other-
And there's stuff that's in your bylaws that's not necessarily from statute.
nor do we-
So if we're,
Right.
correct.
Yeah.
I just wondered, as somebody who's not doing all that, I was like, oh, poor Teresa's the only one that's required to do anything.
Well, and some of that's going to become NAs here, you know. those are funds.
I'm gonna be that person. I'm gonna be that person that asks probably an annoying question, but I think it's worthwhile asking. I'm not trying to dwell on the membership piece, but I'm also thinking about individuals who are dually diagnosed. And I don't think that DMHA necessarily needs to have a representative here, but is it possible to integrate either in the policy section? And I know we have behavioral health represented, but is it possible to somehow integrate hearing from somebody from DMHA concerning dually diagnosed individuals, or do you just consider that more on the BEAD side? Is that making sense? I'm trying to somehow think through.
I think it's a relevant point, and I think that it's something that we don't have to put in writing, but that the director can keep in mind as we consider family members and individuals with lived experience.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that.
Thank you for helping me find the words.
I knew
today.
what you meant.
The
I
allergy
agree with you.
medication is hitting me hard today.
So the only, what I'm gonna call substantive change that I hear is to move the order. Presiding officer moves to 4. Everything else. Good.
Colors.
I know.
Is
I know.
Is this green and red, the thing?
I do appreciate
Green or red, is
the,
it?
um,
It almost.
I appreciate the addition of adding the accessibility features into the bylaws. I think that is a very wonderful and reflective move of the need for,
We're trying to be much
access.
more cognizant of that.
yeah.
Because we all need reminders, even if it's what we do every day,
Oh, yeah.
we need reminders.
But I appreciate that it's formalized in the bylaws. That's excellent. Thank you.
Now, I don't remember the process. Do I have to have the motion revised with the change to reflect the change?
Maybe just do it, just in case.
Yeah,
I'll do a motion.
Yeah.
Make a motion to move that presiding officer. What's that respect?
all right.
Need a second? Do we need a second? Do we need to vote? Do we vote here?
We're going to go. That way, I can have, or you actually did probably did like a kind of rescind and you.
Yes, so I'll make a motion to accept the bylaws as amended.
Yes,
I'll second.
then we have a second, so. Any other comment, discussion? All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Motion carried unanimously. Oh, right. Had to go back to my, I used to do this all the time, Rob. You know, it's like I don't do it anymore. All right.
All right.
Guess what?
Kyle.
Somebody pull a fire alarm. I should like take a break and
A minute early too.
I know.
Wow.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Don't
Here we
blow,
go.
don't blow.
We didn't think it's a good thing. It's a good thing she gets to-
2 meetings
Well,
later.
half a minute there, you know.
Kyle, 2 minutes, 2 meetings late, though. Don't
Yeah.
forget that minute early.
I'll credit that for future meeting. Yeah. We're gonna come back to this slide around our transformation grant update, but I wanted to really just start with just a quick discussion of some of the trends that we're seeing in terms of services and outcomes related to competitive integrated employment. As you all know, or you all helped us establish the big picture goal of increasing our CIE outcomes pretty substantially. We used the Day in Employment Services Outcome Systems report as the data point for that goal. So I'd like to just kind of talk a little bit about what we're seeing in terms of trends from that DASOS report over the last 3 years. So as a reminder, the first year that we used to benchmark that goal in 2021, we had a CIE rate of 23% of folks that we were capturing in that report, that was their primary setting week to week, was in a CIE setting. 19% of folks in 2021 were in a facility setting as their primary week to week. And then 23% were in non-employment day services as their week to week. In 2022, and these numbers have continued to trend in the directions that I'm going to kind of describe year to year. So in 2022, we had a 2% increase in competitive integrated employment to 25%, a 3% decrease in the facility rate to 16%, and then a 5% increase in the non-employment day services rate to 37%. So we are seeing a decrease in the number of folks that their primary environment in a week-to-week basis is a facility setting. Some minimal increase in CIE settings, but predominantly the biggest shift and biggest weighted place that folks are landing, we think, is in non-employment day services. That trend continued in the most recent data that we have for 2023. So we did have a reduction, and just as a caveat, and this is really Shelley Thomas's credit. We should have just added this to the prior. She really worked very diligently to get more providers to feed their data into the DASOS report in 2023. So there's, I think, another 200 or so providers that hadn't historically fed into that system that we're now feeding into that reporting system in 2023. So our numbers are a little skewed. So I'm going to give you both kind of the total and then the adjusted, meaning if we just kind of looked at the providers that reported in 2022 and then compared that data to their data for 23, just so that we can see a little bit of a comparison of those new providers. Maybe they're skewing one way or the other. So the non-adjusted in 2023 facility rate was 13%. So another 3% reduction. Adjusted, so for just the providers who had reported in 2022, their 2023 number was 14%. So still a reduction. But it looks like the providers that we've added to the report rely less on facility settings than the provider set who has historically reported. The competitive integrated rate for the total in 2023 was 24%. So we actually had a 1% reduction from 2022's 25%. And that was for the whole provider set that reported. Adjusted though, that provider set that had reported in 2022 added another percent to the CIE outcome, so 26%. And then non-employment day services, again, heavy trending in this direction. We anticipated that, but I think we need to really think very seriously about what we do about this data and the trends we're seeing. That non-employment day setting in 2023 rose to 42% for the total reporting. For the adjusted amount of folks reporting in 2022, that was 40%, but still an increase. So that data is skewing in a direction that in some ways there's wins, and in other ways we're not seeing the shift from facilities occurring in a way that is pointing us towards those folks are landing in CIE as their primary setting. They're landing probably in non-employment day services primarily. So we're going to do some work digging into that data to see if there are incremental or sort of any employment outcomes that aren't represented in that primary primary environment data set. Perhaps someone has started a new job, but they're only working 5 hours a week. That's not going to show up in that primary environment data set, but it might show up if we start to slice and dice a little bit deeper about seeing some of those smaller wins or other ways of looking at CIE outcomes. So hopefully we'll have more to come as we work with IIDC on kind of getting into that data set and looking a little more deeply. really that is tracking with the work that we're doing internally to, as you know, in July of last year, we instituted a service billing modifier for our pre-vocational services and our day habilitation services so that we could actually track if that service was happening in a facility setting or a community setting. And so as we look at the DASOS data and compare it to the internal data that we have, I think it's really tracking pretty well, you know, very heavy utilization for day habilitation. Although I will say that one of the things to note is that the ratio between community and facility utilization in day hab is about a 3-to-1 ratio. So there are about 3 times as many folks, or 3 times as many hours of utilization in the community setting as there are in, facility as in day, I think. Yeah. And then, however, in pre-vocational services, it's a pretty staggering divergence. So the ratio really is 17-to-1 in terms of facility versus community. So we're talking a pretty heavy reliance on facility and almost no, really negligible community pre-vocational service utilization. So as we continue to really move towards phasing out our facility funding for pre-vocational services, we want to rely pretty heavily on that new modifier to start to track where folks are landing and to see if we can't identify any trends internally. We're also going to look into really what is occurring in those day hab settings, you know, beyond just utilization. What's the quality of those services? What's their experiences in those settings? So that's sort of a next level or a next layer of work that we're trying to do.
Kyle, on that note, I know I was part of the subgroup that talked about the DASOS report and how we could use that data. One of the things that kept coming up that I would be interested on the deep dive of the data is what are those ratios or the number of hours kind of geographically? Like, is it more regional based? And also, and this is, I know this is a bit of a stretch, but kind of how that relates to the accessibility of public transportation. So thank you.
Make it a note. I think it's great, Katie, you know, and I just had a conversation with Teresa Gracia or IADC about some of that very question of can we slice that by region or start to look at geographically the outcomes beyond just kind of a statewide.
Also, I would just
picture,
you know, the competitive integrated employment numbers may not be where we all want them to be, but they are heading, and I think that's something we're celebrating is that is I know it seems like a small percentage move. That is a lot of people. And this is going to be a big ship to turn, but those went up and both of those were cuts of those data. So that's something worth acknowledging because they didn't move much for the past decade. So that's the right direction.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah. The last piece in this trends outcome data that I think, you know, I don't think we should take credit for in terms of our work within DDRS necessarily, but I think statewide, I know a lot of folks will be excited by some of the trends in our 14C certificate utilization in the state. So most recent or so in 2023, the data that I have from the U.S. Department of Labor, we had 32 holders of 14C certificates. As of April of this year, that number is down to 32. Excuse me. I said, what did I say for 23?
32.
32. In 2024, that's 23. So basically a reduction in 9 certificate holders. And I know that is going to continue just based on some of the communications that we've received from current facility operators who've said either that probably does not reflect the actual reduction or divestment from those settings. They might still have certificate, but they've already divested some.
Yeah, and I would also say of those 32 certificates, they're not all providers. A lot of time, like there are some schools and things like that. So
Yeah, there's a
Um,
handful. Yeah. that aren't
yeah,
providers.
so the number of actual providers is dwindling very quickly.
Yeah. So just quickly, a couple of updates on some of our work here this year. As a reminder, the official end of our employment collaboratives will be June of this year. Although we are working with our vendor who's been really instrumental in doing some of the on-site work with those providers. We're working with them to be able to offer the TA that we had scheduled for year 2 through the end of this year. So even after that employment collaborative kind of officially ends in terms of the structured bringing those cohorts together, there's still going to be a lot of resources available to them, particularly through the end of this year. But I know that a lot of them have even baked in some additional TA work and some consultancy fees through their transformation grants through next year. That has been honestly, I can't say enough about the commitment and the intentionality of that provider cohort, those 2 cohorts, to engage in this process meaningfully. And I'm sure that Kelly could, we could tell stories about providers who some of them were skeptical of what we were doing at the start. And I think are actually some of our bigger champions now. So that is a credit to them and their teams for really engaging with us earnestly.
I would just, Kim probably knows what I'm going to share, but I think we're really beginning to hear what I find to be most encouraging and uplifting, that from providers who, to your point, not all were completely bought in to the concept when we started, and that's quite all right. But the technical assistance that they've received in this fact-based mapping, I've had multiple now comment to me that this isn't just about employment. Yeah. This is systemic transformation. It's cultural change. It's viewing things differently. And what I'd love to hear is that providers are saying, this is changing the total landscape. This is changing our business model. That's it. We want to really think about how do we go about doing this. We say the word all the time, but operationalizing it isn't always easy. How can we be truly person-centered, right? Or individualized or customer based? And that's every industry and company. But to hear that and for individuals to recognize the value of that means, to your point, we are making great headway. And I think we should not get discouraged because those really aren't small gains. The numbers may not be big, but those are big gains.
Hi.
Okay.
Are you hearing any feedback from the individuals who are transitioning out of the 14 Cs and what their feelings, response, fears, anything that, because I've heard a little bit from one of our council members who is I guess in touch with a lot of folks that are in a 14C. And I said that there's a lot of folks are feeling nervous, anxious with the change. And how is DDRS kind of supporting alleviating some of those fears, or is that an area where you need support?
That's actually part of, you can speak to that. I don't.
What were you gonna say?
Well, I was gonna say, that's really a part of the process
Yeah.
as we think about this transformation and the collaboratives and the technical assistance. It is meeting people one-on-one. Obviously we have the CCIR process and that's kind of step one, but it's normal. It's right. There's anxiety, there's fear of the unknown and change. And really it is a focus to understand, what is it? What is it that you're afraid you're going to lose? Or what is it that you fear? What is it that you want? And walking alongside. So it doesn't just stop. If a provider chooses, and some have chosen for various reasons to no longer offer sheltered work or facility-based pre-vote. Everyone wants to reference that. But where do you want to go and how do we walk alongside you and get there? So yes, we're going to continue to support, I think, through case management, through engagement with providers, because that's really where the rubber meets the road. And then I'm looking at what services and supports we need to put in place systemically to incent, enhance, and actually support that process. But I also think it's an opportunity for all of us to continue in our own lanes to how do we collaborate and partner to address that?
Including starting earlier,
At way earlier.
I know Teresa, that in rehab service dealing with transition age and well beyond.
Yeah.
I think it isn't just a conversation that starts and stops here.
It doesn't.
And
It
that's,
has to start early on. And, I always speak to my own personal professional experience. I haven't gone through a transition, 20 years ago now. But we just called it a fear survey. We were just very direct and point blank, and it was sitting down with people. And when you really got down to it, most of the time, all of those things could be addressed. What is it? Well, I want to see my friends regularly. Or mom and dad were worried about okay, what in particular? Let's walk through that. So it really is, it's all about life course philosophy and being very individualized and person-centered.
Yeah. And it's also talking about success stories.
Yes.
Yeah, you do need to share those. And also it's okay to share the failures and to show that there can be a failure and then a success.
And I was going to say, Kate, I think if anybody knows anybody who is scared and feeling anxious, that they should be reaching out to Self Advocates of Indiana, where there is a peer who could probably help them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can definitely, if you share that information with me to know who exactly, if it's Becky, if it's Sean, any of those individuals, we can definitely help facilitate that from the council perspective. My last council related question is, in the community, when you're working with future employers, what kind of questions are they bringing up? Is that part of the training in TA for potential employers outside of the 14 Cs and more natural community-based employment?
So I just want to quickly respond to your prior question, Kate, with some additional context. And Sean, I think you hit it on the head beyond what Kelly has shared and what you all have kind of discussed. One of the things that we are doing is we're working with a vendor to really go in and actually interview families and individuals and providers who have either gone through transition out of a 14C workshop or they're currently in the middle of that transition. And so we're identifying some success stories or identifying some stories where everything seemed hopeless and, we had a staff member who just really was dogged in their determination and they turned the corner on that. So we're doing all that work to kind of get that ground level kind of feedback from folks, and they're still in the collection phase for that information. So hopefully here, probably next quarter, we'll be able to.
Who is it?
IIDC is working to do some of that collection. So it's more qualitative than quantitative, but they're doing a lot of interviews with families and individuals and providers. To your second question, Kate, I think there's a couple answers. One, providers, throughout the last 2 years, we've been working with them on shifting their mindset about how they approach employers. So I don't know that this is going to answer your question as much as I think what we have seen is that and by we, I mean the system typically approaches employers with a kind of a charity mindset of, we've got these folks, would you find it in your heart to find them a job? And that is not the way that we have been working with our providers in these cohorts. We're approaching this really from more of a customized employment or kind of a matching process where we say the first thing you need to do is to understand who your employers are in your community. So a lot of those providers are mapping their employers through the transformation grants. A number of them are also using technical assistance to do some actual employer engagement training. And in that training, I've seen that happen in a different setting, but the first thing they do is they go in and they just do an informational interview. Like, what do you do? You know, what's your kind of business look like? What's your day to day? Do you have any pain points? Starting to just try to understand that employer, how they function in their community, who they employ, just who they are. And then through that, there's an identification of potential opportunities to match someone who has interests in that particular employer industry. So we're hopefully shifting some of that conversation and doing some technical assistance with those providers to say, go in and figure out how to be a benefit to those employers rather than, you know, make that case.
Another thing that we're really pushing with our members is when they're talking to legislators, not just state or federal legislators. I mean, they go to every business in the community. So we're telling our members, you need to explain to them that you have a workforce shortage. We have workers.
Yes.
Let's make this happen. This is a win-win. And I think that that has been incredibly successful for the ones who are doing it. And also another thing that we've talked about is kind of how do we define accommodation? Because I feel like that's very scary for someone to say, well, there's an accommodation needed. Sometimes it's a chair.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, it's just kind of dispelling some of those myths. So.
That's great. Okay. So I'll go back to this just quickly because I know
You're fine.
I'm hitting up against time, but
You can eat it. You can
No,
eat
no,
it.
no.
It's fine.
we're all ambitious about what we could do now.
Hey, before
Um,
you move on, I was
yeah,
sitting here
go.
like, should I say it? I'm just gonna say it. One of the things that might be helpful to think about, and Teresa and I had this conversation yesterday. Some of you guys might be aware of what's happening up in Fishers. They have a pretty forward-thinking way of looking at things. We did a point of view day that's hosted by the mayor and 117 stakeholders, including legislators from every level, were there. It was really, really amazing. But what we're doing is really working to partner with the chamber. Because when you get your chamber bought in.
Yep.
And your chamber's like, oh, you have something that we need. And let's figure out a way to make the match. It has been really helpful. One zone, the Chamber for Carmel and Fishers has been absolutely amazing. And this year it felt like we finally made momentum and we started with, these are the myths. The average accommodations across all jobs for all people are like less than $500.
Most are.
And so, and that was before technologies caught up. So that was a few years ago. But I think that partnering with chambers is a really, really good nugget to think about in your local communities.
Well, and for those of you that don't know, there are groups of chambers. So you can find that, like, if you don't necessarily have one in your community, there's one that probably serves that community as part of the group that you may not even know about. So I'm happy to make those connections for you.
Thanks. All great points. And Kelly, I think that conversation about involving the chambers and even our workforce boards is probably a statewide challenge as well. And I'd love to tackle that here in the future. So quickly, just transformation grant update. We are continuing to move along. We have 22 proposals that are fully approved and they're actively working through their grant activities. We have another 6 that are in the process of either, we have reviewed them. We're kind of negotiating some of the elements with those 6 providers. So we hope to have those approved really imminently. And then we have another 4 that we have received. So now we have received all grant proposals. We have another 4 that are in the process of review with our team. So really we're at the tail end of getting these grants approved and out the door. And then into the grant project period. Any questions?
Those wrap up this at the end of this next fiscal year?
They wrap up in March of 24. So it's a pretty small project period for some of these.
Yep.
Good question. Yep.
Isn't that as the timeline was here?
Yep. The last thing in provider capacity that I just wanted to flag is we've been utilizing a resource through our membership with the State Employment Leadership Network to support case management, access to an e-learning course. And I've gotten really good feedback from case managers as we've been able to talk to them We have, I believe, 50 or so slots every year. We'll continue to use those to support case manager learning on CIE to the extent that we've got that annually through the SELA membership. We do have good utilization and completion of that e-learning course. I think we're around 85% every year. Not amazing, but given that it's self-directed and that's pretty time limited, I feel pretty happy about that. I will be talking to case managers here, I think next month. And I would really like to use some of that time to get some additional feedback about that, but just flagging an additional resource that we've tried to make available to case managers as we think about sort of the whole ecosystem of provider capacity. And lastly,
Dumb question.
Sean.
There are no dumb questions. Are
Go
you
for it,
talking
Sean.
about like case managers as in IP&G people or?
As in
Yeah.
Beads case managers,
They have.
Beads case managers, yeah.
Okay. Okay. I just want to make sure because, as
Yeah.
a consumer coming from a provider, they have case managers.
Yes, the case managers like IPNG and connections and the other.
I didn't.
That's a great question. No, I appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah, that's the group that we are making that resource available to.
Okay, but can I say something else?
Sure.
I don't know who's not doing, I don't want to say. I don't know who's not doing their job, but as in doing CCIRs, still people do not know what life course is.
Oh, it's everywhere.
Nobody, not even the staff. Just letting you know.
And that's on the provider side of thing or?
Yeah,
fixed?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I ask them all the time in their meetings, do they talk about it? They don't know what it is.
Is it the word life course or is it?
Well, then
Or
the
the
person that
process.
I'm with explains it in different ways and they still.
And they still don't, okay, thank you for clarifying. I can see maybe not knowing the life course, so I appreciate it.
I have a question about that. And Karen, you'll be able to answer this. I know at one point, case managers didn't have any specific tool that they had to use, but they were allowed to use whatever tools they felt. Is that still true?
Yes.
Because it feels like we should say, do what?
Yeah. I know, I knew it's not.
Yes, but I wonder if everybody was forced to use something like my favorite's the trajectory because it fits for all things.
Yeah.
It's something that people can visually understand and see. And there are other people who are doing training, myself being one of them, that are using the trajectory as a concept to help people understand whether it's behavior or employment or whatever it is. And I'm not saying I want to mandate any, I am saying I want to mandate it. But could we do that? I mean, couldn't we like really in our training say, because I'll be fair, I think there are case managers who are using no tools. And that's really the team meeting is where it starts, right? We know DSPs are not typically at team meetings. It is all of the people who pop in for their 10 minutes. Nobody's super invested in the process. And if we don't get to that point, it will never, ever permeate the point of service delivery. It never will. And I think it's so important that it does, because for as long as I've been around and as gray hair as you guys have made me, we've done a lot of different person-centered planning tools or just, things have happened. I love this. It makes the most sense for all people. It makes an impact for DSPs who understand it for their own life, but we have to get it to the point of service delivery.
So, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say that the Administration on Community Living has identified charting the life course as a best practice for person-centered planning. And so a lot of the materials that come from ACL support that. And I think more states are trying to adopt it as not just the philosophy like we've done here within DDRS, but as a tool, just generally. So I think that's something that we individually could each commit to as far as advocating for that, and sharing that with case managers, with DSPs, family members. I'm wondering if instead of mandating it as you have to use this, could it be potentially used as a quality indicator of services? So it is already. So, okay, perfect. So that makes a lot of sense then. It's like, this should naturally be the tool that case managers utilize to indicate quality. And I don't know how to communicate that better to folks, but.
I appreciate that. I think we've been we were pretty intentional when we adopted the life course, not to mandate, but to embed that philosophy in everything that we do. And we will continue to do that. I think we were pretty intentional about not mandating specific tools. But when we're reviewing cases or we're brought into team meetings, our staff will default to those tools because that's what we know and that's what we think is best practice. And then when we review PCISPs, we do all of that through that lens.
And so using it as a quality indicator, how does that come into play? So this case manager group maybe they don't use it. How does that come into play in the quality? Like when you're.
As those PCISPs are developed
Yes.
and reviewed, that is one of the metrics that we use when we review those in the rubric.
So if it doesn't exist, it wasn't used, that case is deemed.
Well, that PCISP is designed around that, the domain.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's structured.
Yes, and a PCISP has to be present.
Right.
So, yeah. Sorry.
You guys are terrible. The PCISPs, I'm sorry.
You're not.
What's a great concept?
And it's amazing that you can see PCISPs that like have no relevant information and the information that's there is not even correct. It's not being used in a way that you as the payer of services would hope that it would be used. It is not used as a tool to help people achieve their best life. Globally.
Right.
Some people do great. I'm sure they work at IPG.
Yeah.
It's a team document. It is not the case manager's document. It is the individual's document and the team's document. It is not the case manager's document, so.
It is not uncommon to come to a meeting though, and it's already completed and there is no collaboration. It is a problem. I'm just saying, it's not being used in the way to facilitate empowerment and growth towards best life that we would hope.
I would say that we will never finish. It's a journey, right? Like we are not going to reach 100% perfection ever. So we continue and work with case management entities, on, what that looks like, what best practice is. We do quarterly meetings with the CMOs. Lots of things are in place to try to increase that quality. Our commitment to that isn't changing, but it's not something that, it's unrealistic to think that every PCISP will be perfect every time. So I will say, because, I mentioned this any opportunity I get, when CMS visited back in November 22, right? The site that they visited, that they went to, they reviewed PCISPs and said it was great. And we have presented on those PCISPs. Actually, Heather has presented on those PCISPs at national conferences. So it's a journey. I think we've got the groundwork. We just have to keep working to improve that quality.
I'm going to interrupt. We've got about 10 minutes left.
I started talking again.
No, and so, it's really good conversation, and I think maybe it might be, maybe it's something we want as a future agenda item.
So I think it's fair to say that you can draw on the council for the individual and family advocacy component of educating and training individuals and families to utilize charting the life course tools, teach them what it is, how to use it. And if their case manager is not using it, then we can help empower them to say, this is the tool. I think the only pushback we're going to get is that that limits choice. So if we say this is the tool that has to be used, some people may say, I don't like charting the life course. That's not what I want to use. So that is something I have heard before, but I think we could help say to individuals and families, this is an expectation of your case manager. And if they are not presenting this as a tool for you to use, then you have the right to advocate to use it or find something that does work for you. And I won't get into the questions about how you are measuring quality on the tool itself when it is used. That could be another hour-long conversation.
Do you have anything?
I know what it's like to be bumped, so these last two pieces take too long. So I promise to speak to these at our next meeting.
Are you sure?
So, yeah.
Well, I'm gonna be Jessica, so please bear with me. I wanted to give you an update on the innovation pilot projects, and I will say, and I believe you will see from this presentation, there's been a lot of work done into this and a lot of great work that's going on. Just as a reminder, we had 44 projects that were approved, and those are divided into 3 distinct funding tiers so that we could maximize the funds that we had allocated for those projects. Tier 1, and those were held at a maximum of $100,000. We had 22 projects there. For tier 2, it had an upper limit of $250,000, and we had 8 projects. And then we had 14 projects that were approved at tier 3, and with no particular cap, if you will, or budget limit. It truly was evaluated utilizing the scope of work or the plan that was submitted. And so you'll see on there the division of those funded projects by the tiers, excuse me. Next slide.
Are those projects listed?
They are, don't we have those listed on the website? And I think I've got a slide at the end that will lead you to there. Also, as the team was really considering this, we looked at 5 distinct focus areas for those particular projects. Those being, I just say community change or partnerships in the community, support through technology, supporting those who support, right? Caregivers and others, information and skills for individuals, and then truly looking at exploring unique models of payment and services. So thinking a bit outside the box, if you will. In addition, just a shout out once again, Kelly Harper, to your point, I think life course is applicable across the whole. I used it, for business strategy, planning, my own life decisions. But we did ask that the grantees utilize the person-centered life course Nexus tools in presenting and developing their particular projects. And you see an example here of one of those projects. You can go ahead and move forward. I'm really trying to be quick. There's been a lot of support from my perspective for the grantees, those that are part of our pilot projects. There was a webinar where they could introduce themselves to others and their project plans, and we've held other engagements to keep them connected. So you can see the different webinars there. I think it's also important to note that there's a focus on, the goal was not to just fund a short-term project, right? Historically, what happens with public funds and grants is that we invest and we have these wonderful things going on, and as soon as that funding stream disappears, the grant ends, it is no more. So we really went at this with how can we ensure sustainability, and even as we thought about particular projects that were proposed, might this inform us and lead to the development of or identification of a sustainable pathway for funding. But we did look at We have offered the Charting the Life Course Ambassador Series to all of the grantees. And we've hosted multiple Charting the Life Course round tables. So you can just see, I'm not going to read that to you. Oh, I just hit the mic. Some of the areas covered. Next slide. So let me just highlight for you a few. Hold on a minute. I want to make sure that I don't screw this up. So I want to highlight for you a few of the projects, and we're going to present more of these as time goes on. There are just 3 that are going to be highlighted today, and they're in no particular order. But first, and I'm just going to move left to right. The first is referencing Stone Belt and their innovation pilot project. They are developing a formal manual and business with us today for the provision of spiritual support coordination within a larger provider organization, looking at it as a means to support individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities to explore the role of spirituality in their life, identify and find community around their particular or individualized spiritual identity, and to provide education to outside entities such as faith-based congregations around how best to be inclusive and welcoming to new members, excuse me. So the second that we're going to highlight is Keys for Success. That innovation pilot project is piloting, providing larger group music therapy sessions in order to assess the outcomes for individuals in those groups and compare it to the outcomes for those that currently are receiving one-on-one services. It also includes some music therapy community events. So again, looking at a current service model and how might we look at it differently and evaluate its efficacy. And then third, we're highlighting Pure Abilities. They're piloting a socialization training program called Bridging the Gap that includes valuable classwork and social events to gain and practice social skills. As an example, they held a mixer as part of their speed dating events, providing opportunities for both friendship and romantic connections to be fostered. So anyway, we have some really cool things going on. The next steps is we will continue as a team of support for these innovation pilot projects to engage virtually and conduct in-person on-site visits. I know Jessica and the team have been traveling around the state, visiting those sites and engaging with them regularly to understand what we're learning, if we're encountering any challenges and obstacles, and if there's a need to redirect. The grantees are creating short videos in order to share their project and successes thus far. There is another innovation pilot project summit in the works. And then as note, each grantee is required to conduct their own evaluation, but we as a division will also conduct post-project evaluation activities on all of those. So we're going to continue to report out not just on what the projects are doing, but as we garner more information, what have we learned? Kelly Hartman, I'm looking at you, but we've got a lot of things that are going on within the division that are connected to some of those innovation pilot projects. So future state will be, presenting more what are we doing with said projects and how might this frame our future.
And I did want to send a shout out of appreciation to the state and team and Jessica and all of her folks, empowering us to be really collaborative with one another, like crossing over the projects has been so great and such a breath of fresh air, considering some of the really negative things that are happening amongst people in the provider world. And so I've loved collaborating and presenting with other projects. And it's really cool. So thank you for that.
And Jessica isn't with us today, but I really have to give her a ton of credit.
She's done a great job.
I think she, as an individual, has done a stellar job facilitating that and encouraging that and ensuring that that happens. So I really want to recognize her in that capacity. So for updates, oh, it's just the link. I'll send it to you. But there is an IPP webpage. Also, we do utilize our Bureau of Disabilities Facebook page for providing updates as well. And I think most of you know about how to subscribe to our updates and lists sort of. But did I make the time?
Right.
12 o'clock.
Good
All right.
job.
I'm turning it over to you to bring us home, Ella.
I have something. You can think. You get the next.
So yeah, we were just gonna say, for me at least, when we were talking about charting a life course and training families and individuals, that's something Self Advocates of Indiana would be happy to do so as well.
Wonderful.
Okay, you said it kind of.
Perfect. All right, you want to close this out?
All right, is meeting adjourned? Do we have any questions?
We do have a meeting next month, but we are back to a virtual format, but I think we are in person once again in June.